In this world, if you're poor, you're at a disadvantage. And the disadvantage is symptomatic or systematic. There's systems and prejudices and principalities and powers existing in our world that make life more difficult if you are poor. I mean, just on a very practical level, you know it as well as I do. If you're poor, you don't have access to the same kind of health care that people who are rich have. If you're poor, you don't have access to the same kind of housing that people who are rich have. If you're poor, you don't have access to the same educational opportunities that people who are rich have. If you're poor, they're just not the same number of resources available to better your life, to change your life, to turn around a legacy. I don't know how many of you know this. I know I've talked with some of you about this because it was an important part of my life for a little while. But when we were pastoring in Bangkok, I had a friend who was one of the richest people in the world, multi-billionaire. He was on Forbes 100 richest list every year I knew him. It was a weird friendship, as you can imagine. And he was apologizing one time for being away over a weekend. And he said something that struck me, and I've never forgotten it. He said, "I'm so sorry, I forget." He wasn't just apologizing for missing church, so there must have been something else going on. But he said, my banker flew me to Macau for the weekend, and they had already arranged this 5-star hotel, and then I had to play golf with Annika Sorenstam, who was the number 1 women's golfer in the world at the time. And he was just like, my banker arranged all this for me, and I just had to go. And I was like, my banker doesn't pay for my trips to Macau. My banker charges me fees for service. And it occurred to me that the rich and the middle class don't have the same opportunities in our world, much less the rich and the poor. Because the things that you get, if you're rich, the advantages you get are substantial. And so I think Jesus is acknowledging that. He's acknowledging that, and he's saying, God cares especially for the poor because they have so many disadvantages that one of my missions, one of my ministries on earth, one of the purposes, what it means to be a disciple is to preach good news, to be good news, to embody good news for people who are struggling.